Happy Friday, everyone. This is Mrs. B, and I hope you have your notebook out with a pencil, and you won't probably need a calculator. You could have one handy, but this is more about diagrams and mental math. So if we had 160 raisins and peanuts in a jar and 40% of them are raisins, how many raisins are in the jar? So we have talked about percent rulers before, and we are coming back to them again. So if we're just going to fill in our percent ruler, we have 0%, which means that's 0 raisins, and 100% of the raisins and peanuts that's 160 altogether. And we would like 40%. So we can, halfway through, of course, would be 50%. And then think of what is half of 160, or think of what is half of 16, which is 8, add a 0. And then, but we need 10% less than that. So we can find 10%. And by finding 10%, you are moving your decimal point over one spot. So you've got your 160, your decimal points at the end, and you move it over one spot for 10%. So that would just be 16 of them. So we would 50% minus 10% equals 40%. So that's how we're going to use this. 50% is 80, 10% is 16. We will subtract, and we have 64. So our 40%, there would be 64 of them. All right, so we have our, draw this in your notebook, draw a percent ruler, and if at any time during the video you need to hit pause so that you can catch up and write, because you should be doing all this writing with me, just pause and then hit play again. So 0%, 100% is all of it, half of it is 50%, and then they're saying what other percents can be helpful. So if you're trying to do some mental math, other ones that can be helpful is we cut 100% in half for 50%. Let's cut 50% in half and get 25%. We know that we just used 10%. That can be very helpful. And then if you had something really weird like 32%, we might need a 1%. So I feel like, oh, and half of 10%, 5%. So the ones that I would add that we would like to be able to figure out are 1%, 5%, 10%, and 25%. This list right here can really, and all of you, you can all do that mentally, and that can you can figure out any percent with those. All right, make a percent ruler. Fill in your 0, 50%, and 100%. Pause when you need to. So find 50% of 120. So 120 is the 100%. And then you're going to find 50%, 25%, and 10%. And then it says on the bottom, the bonus question is which percent can you use to find 30% of 120? So go ahead and pause the video, do as many of those as you can, and then come back together and we'll check. All right, so 50% would be 60. And then we're going to cut 50% in half, and we're going to cut 60 in half. And then we need 10%. We can start with our original 120, move your decimal point over one spot, and 10% is 12. And then it says, which percent can you use to find 30%? Well, I want to use my 10%. And I would multiply that times 3 to get 30%. And 10% equaled 12, and I will multiply that times 3 as well and get 36. So 30% is 36. All right. I would like you to try to do this one on your own, so please pause your video and then come back. All right, so let's check your work. So half of 36 is 18, add a 0, so 180, and we should know that from our angles lessons. Half of 18 is 9, add a 0, so 90. And then if we go back to our original 360 and we need to find 10%, put your decimal in, you move it over one spot, 10% is 36. Then it says, how can you find 70%? So you could have done it however you wanted to, but I think what I would do is I would take 50% and a couple of 10%, and I would add those together. So this is 180, and these are both 36. And then if you add those together, you should get your answer of 262. All right, use a percent ruler or just the numbers if you don't want to put it on a ruler, and get 70%. So to get 50% or half of 70, that's 35. And then what would we need to do to get to 70? So we want to add 2 more 10%. So what is, if you put a decimal point at the end of 70 and move the decimal over one spot, what are you getting? I hope you're saying 7 to yourself in your head. So you need 150% and 2 10% to equal 70. I'm running out of room. So this would equal 49. All right, this one's worded a little bit differently, so we got to think about this. What is 35 out of 70? So 70 is the total, and that is 100%. Now, instead of finding, we need to find, they're giving us the number and we're finding the percent ourselves. So we're at 70. Let's just start with 50%. So what's half of 70? 35. We landed on it first. So what percent is 35 out of 70? 50%. All right, here's a little bit bigger one. So we need to think about how to make 75%, because we need 75% of 220. So my brain automatically goes to using a 50% and a 25%, because 50 and 25 equals 75. So let's try that. So 220 is our total. Half of that is 110, and a half of 110 is 60. So if we need 75, it's like we're adding 25% plus 50%, and we'll add these to get 170. Okay, let's make a new percent ruler. You guys are going to be doing this one on your own. So at a fruit stand, there were 280 pieces of fruit sold. 55% of the fruit sold was bananas. How many bananas were sold? So you've got your 50% there. Whoops, 280. So you would need a 50% and a 5%. Now we haven't talked about 5% yet, but we do know how to get 10%. After you get 10%, I want you to cut your 10% in half to get 5%, and then add your 5% to the 50%. So pause the video now, do that work, and then hit play. All right, so half of 28 is 14, add a 0. So we're down there. And then I need 10%. So move my decimal over 1. So 10% is 28. Half of 10 is 5, and half of 28 is 14. So I'm going to add my 50% plus my 5% to get 55%. So 154 bananas were sold. All right, here's one you're going to use a lot in real life. At Olive Garden, our bill was $60 and we left a $12 tip. What percent of the bill was left as a tip? So $60 is the whole bill. And we need to see what percent. So a lot of times we're finding the number. This time they gave us the number, the dollar amount is 12. We have to figure out what percent that is. So half of 60 is 30. Let's do, then half of 50 is 25, and that would be $15. So we're getting close. So let's see what 10% is. So go up to your 60, move your decimal point over once, and that's 6. All right, well, we need 12. So if we double the 10%, whoops, that should be a 20. We get 20%, and there's 12. So 20% tip, that's the first part of the problem. And then the total bill is $60 for the bill, $12 tip, added together, $72. Okay, fill out your percent ruler, pause the video, and I want you to get it says my water bottle holds 840 milliliters. How many milliliters of water would I drink each day based on the following? So you are going to find 10%, 50%, 80%, 65%, and 30%. When you are done finding as many of those as you can, start play, and then we will check your work. All right, so I filled in on mine. I did 5%, 10%, and 50%. So I think those will help me get all of these. So 10%, 84, just move the decimal over one spot. 50%, 420, I just cut 100% in half. 80% now, so we would need 50% and 3 10%. Or you may have done 100% minus 2 10%. But I already started it this way, so this is the way I'm going to do it for now. But always more than one way to do it. So that's 7. So 672. 65% would be 50% plus 10% plus 5%. And that would be 146. And then 30%. So need your 10% 3 times. So 84 times 3, 252. All right, I'm not using my calculator, so I hope I did that correctly. I'm sure y'all let me know on Monday if I didn't. All right, so, but what about these? So I want to, I want to show you, well, I can't show you. I want to tell you how to use your calculator to do some of these harder ones, like 33% of 15. So you are going to need one of the yellow calculators or the TI-34. So hopefully most of you have your own, or make sure you have one of mine, the TI-34. And you're just going to put in the mixed number button and put in 33 1/3. And then so you have the, looking on your calculator, the second row down, you have the mixed number button, then the fraction button, and right next to it is the percent button. So then you just click on the percent button, and then 15, enter. Okay, so pause the video if you need to. You're going to use this button. Then the percent button, then the 15, and then enter. And you should get 5. Okay, so if we try this one, you're going to put 66 2/3 in using that button. then the percent, and then 60. Enter. All right, I got 40. And then these will be easy. Just put in 11, percent button, 80, enter. 8.8. Then 22, percent button, 50, enter. 11. All right, so now it's time to put your headphones away and get your homework. So the sub should have it. There are 2 sheets. They're both white. One has your equations on it, the problems. Show your work right on the worksheet, or if there's not enough room, do it in your notebook, but you must show your work. And then one is a coloring sheet. And yes, coloring is required. All right, be kind to the sub. Get your homework done. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.